climbs off all by itself. It does it itself. Okay?
Yeah, you're right there with me though.
Every time I open the hangar door to go flying, I realize that I'm one of the lucky guys doing something that I dreamt of as a kid.
Duck has always been one of my most favorite airplanes. You know, I kind of say sometimes it's got a face only a mother can love, but you know, it really is an extremely unique airplane. It gets a lot of attention everywhere it goes. It has the ability to land on land as well as on water. I think it's a little more at home on the water than it is on the land. It's got a very narrow landing gear which go up in the side of the pontoon, so it tends to want to turn into the wind, potentially a ground looping airplane. There's a lot of area behind the landing gear, and the airplane is not happy unless it's weather vaning into the wind. Pilot sits in the front, there's a seat in the back, but there's actually kind of a basement in the belly of the airplane. There's two little doors that slide, so in the case of picking somebody up, they could land in the water, taxi up to somebody, get it close, you know, they could swim over, climb in the airplane. There were actually two seat belts for a bench seat, so legally from an FAA point of view, you could carry 4 people in the airplane. I fly it in the water, fly it on the land, take it up the seaplane ramp, take it down the seaplane ramp. It's a lot of fun.
This is a rare opportunity at Oshkosh.
My name is Bill Gaius, and I am the Vice President of Warbirds of America. I'm also the Chairman of the Warbird Flight Line, and that means that I have the opportunity to manage some of the finest volunteers in the entire industry of aviation, and in particular, warbirds. We have the greatest group of people here. They're most professional, most experienced that you could ever even dream of working with. Our pilots appreciate them, spectators appreciate every one of them, and we appreciate each other.
You got to get on one of these rides and listen to it, to the guy that listened to his grandfather when his grandfather told the story. So, I mean, a lot of the tales, you know, the hair on your arms just stands up. That's what happens on that tram. We make them smile, a lot of times they cry. And at the end of it, they have an experience of a lifetime. It's a phenomenal ride. It really is a phenomenal ride. And it's phenomenal because of the narrators and everybody underneath them.
They're a unique piece of history. Each one is unique, and it's, you know, people are drawn to them because of how fast they were produced and built and designed, and now they're pieces of flying history. They have powerful engines. They have, you know, just really unique, beautiful designs, and they went to fight, you know, evil enemies during World War II, and it was amazing what these airplanes did, you know, as far as the firepower and the power and the designs, and being able to be produced in such large numbers in such a quick amount of time. And now there's not a lot of them, so it's very important to restore and preserve these so other people, future generations can see these and understand what they are and what they did.
He rotated home right after that November 11th, 1944 mission, or shortly thereafter. That's one of the reasons you'll see on Lope's Hope, if you look carefully, there's 3 victory markings.
Warbirds in Review is an extension of my little retirement job. I'm a teacher that retired after 34 years, and I work for them researching the background of the airplanes. When they're deciding on color schemes, we work on that, make sure they're accurate. And when I'm really lucky, I find families and get cooperation from them to really tell the stories, because having a Mustang or another Warbird is a great thing, but the most important thing is, as Bruce had said in the presentation, is keeping the story alive of the sacrifices those folks made. And the other thing that's really important about it is being accurate about it, because if you preserve a mistake, you're not really preserving history. So I work really hard to try to make sure that we can back up our sources and have a couple sources for everything. And you know, the best source you can possibly get is the primary source, the pilot, and I've had a few of those. That's becoming much more rare, but their families are very good. You know, Warbirds in Review is important. It keeps these stories going. The folks that produce it are so absolutely professional that it's just easy to work with them, and that's part of a bigger thing. You know, AirVenture Oshkosh doesn't happen without the volunteers. When you want folks like Bruce and these guys to bring in the airplanes, well, they taxi up the airplanes and they got airplanes. They don't have any ground transportation. They need to get to their hotels or Warbirds camping or whatever. There's volunteers there, all your suitcases, they make sure you have water. And without that, people wouldn't come. And the same thing's true of volunteers driving the trolleys and so forth, so that, I mean, this is a really big place. EAA Warbirds and specifically the volunteers take that concern away, because we just know what a great job they'll do. And none of this happens without volunteers.
Well, this airplane right behind me is an S&J-4. I've had it in our family for about 10 or 11 years, I believe, and I was fortunate enough to get to learn on it, kind of hone my craft in tail draggers and piloting as it is. When I was 16, I got to solo it. I soloed it, a Stearman and a Cub, because I had to be an overachiever, you know. Couldn't help it. But I was super lucky to get to fly this guy, and now I fly it in formation. It's anyway, it just has so much history, and it's so cool because this aircraft is full of history, and I get to be a part of that history. It reminds me how to fly, and it reminds me how precious the gift of aviation is, and this thing requires a lot of attention, and I like that about it. One of my favorite things about flying is that it's just a great way to ease your mind of anything else, because you're focused on that plane. You should be. You should be fully enveloped in that aircraft. And oh man, that was a long flight from Dubuque. I could have swore it was like 2 days, but we were about 2 hours total in the air. We all flew up here en route, which is just, you know, a little further apart from each other. And once we got close, we formed back up, and oh my goodness, there's nothing like it. You just stare at your one guy, the guy you're supposed to be watching. There's so much going on, and it was so magnificent coming over Show Center here with all the other Warbird flights passing under and over, and the orchestral feeling of that. It was just so neat. So that was an opportunity of a lifetime, and I've wanted to do that for years. I'm so glad I checked that off, and I'll obviously look forward to that in the future.
join this organization, and it's a constant learning process. And that's another thing that I love about it, because a good pilot is always learning, always.
NETA membership isn't just for pilots. It's for everyone who loves aviation, past, present, and future.
We have a lot of members that are not, they're not even pilots. They love the fact that the airplanes still fly, and they share the enthusiasm and the pride that's going on.
It's a place where history comes to life, where the future is sparked by imagination, and where aviation is more than just wings in the air.
That's what it's all about at the end of the day. What else is it for?
I was asked, where do I see NATA going into the future? And I see nowhere but up.
Be a part of it. Join NATA today.
So, the members of the Shell aerobatic team, how do they do it? Fly super close together? Super close to the ground? Flying up and down and all around without bumping into each other? Why are they comfortable putting their lives on the line every time they fly? What does the word risk mean to them? We can't see them from the ground, but we know there are men in those cockpits. Who are these guys when they're not flying? What makes them tick? Which of them is the best pilot? How well, or not, do they get along when they're on the ground? And can they describe how much sense it makes to fly all this dipsy-doodle stuff, wingtip to wingtip, in the dark? Go figure. These questions answered, maybe, and more next.
My name is Connie Bolin. I'm the founder and now the chairman of Warbirds in Review, so it's my pleasure to welcome you to this a little bit of a late start today, but we have some real troopers here and some real professionals in the Aeroshell team, so they're the perfect ones. If we're going to rain on somebody's parade, it would be the Aeroshell team. They can recover. I'd like to thank our sponsors before we get going here. Scott's Miracle Grow Company is our sustaining sponsor that allows us to have the all the media presence we have here. Sleeping Dog Productions is the company. Scott and Kyle Gaius, John Tennyson is their partner. They do an absolutely terrific job along with the rest of the crew. We should put the camera here on all our camera crew here on one of these sessions. We are also live streaming, so if you have friends who don't want to sit in the rain, they can watch us from the comfort of their computer. Ask them to go to flyingondemand.com to watch. Jelly Belly is a big sponsor for us, and of course the Fagan Fighters World War II Museum in Granite Falls, Minnesota, but it's worth a special trip. So ladies and gentlemen, of course we also need to thank the aircraft owners, because without the aircraft owners, pilots, none of this would happen. And then I will turn it over to our host, which we also need to give a big thank you to, David Hartman, who helps us out every year. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Afternoon, everybody. Gentlemen, you all made it, and you're in line. Amazing. Meet the guys. Mark Henley, Mark, Gene McNeely, Steve Gustafson, Jerry Fordham, Brian Reagan, and Alan Henley. So that's the team. Alan, start us off. How and when and where did you start to create this team?
Well, back in 1985, we were at a little community in northeast Louisiana, the town of Lake Providence, and they had an event going on. They had drag boat racing for a weekend, but anyway, between the boat races, it was kind of boring for the spectators. So they got an idea. They said, let's put on an air show, and we can have some airplanes flying and doing aerobatics and things in between the boat races. And the event had actually been going on for on an annual basis for 3 or 4 years, and I had been invited over there. Had done 2 air shows there consecutive before that. But anyway, in the fall of 1984, Steve's dad, Merle Gustafson, had died in an industrial accident, but he was kind of the star of the show. He had a big Corsair that he used to do air shows in, and he was the local hero, and he was my hero and Steve's hero. But anyway, he had passed away in October of '84. Well, we were at the event, and it was kind of a bittersweet thing to be at Lake Providence. We were there having a good time, but we missed Merle. And anyway, Steve and I were sitting there discussing, talking about his dad, and he goes, "You want to try to do some formation aerobatics?" And I said, "Well, yeah." He said, "My dad used to fly with a guy named Bob Speed, and they used to do a 2-ship formation act flying the T6. And he said they used to do loops and Cuban 8s and all kind of neat stuff." He said, "You want to go try it?" And I said, "Well, I'm game." So we went to the promoter and told him we were going to get a little extra fuel, and we went out and practiced, and we didn't kill each other. And back in those days, we went to the promoter, and they said, the promoter went to the air boss and said, "Hey, these guys want to try a little something new." And so we went out there and did a loop and a roll, and everybody liked it. Well, it happened that the air boss that was there ended up being a really good friend of ours, a guy named Op Gennard. He was an air traffic controller up in Little Rock, and they put on an annual CAF air show in Pine Bluff, and Op goes, "You guys got to come to Pine Bluff." And this was about 2 weeks later, and so we came up there, and actually it was kind of Op's idea. There was another fella, a guy named Ben Cunningham, who flew with us for 12 years. He said he wants to get in on the fun too, so y'all come up a couple of days early, we'll buy you some extra gas, and y'all go put together a routine. And that's how it got started.
So it started with you and Steve?
Yes.
How was the beginning for you, Steve?
What was that question?
How was the beginning with Alan for you?
Oh, it was great. It was great. He's kind of going through the main part of it. Some of the fun stuff of it was trying to figure out who's going to fly where. who's going to lead? Which side are you going to be on? You going to be on the right wing or the left wing? Well, most people don't like to fly the left wing. You usually start the beginners out on the right wing. But Alan and I had really more experience than Ben Cunningham did. But we said, well, we'll put him in the lead.
Yeah.
Oops. We started in there and downhill, and we're coming in, and next thing you know, Ben's turning left, turning right, turning left. Finally, me and Alan spread out, and we actually looked across at each other and went,
"Where's he going?
What blankety blank is he doing?" So Alan says, "I'm lead next." I'm like, "We ain't doing that." So we put him up in there in the lead, and he was a natural at it. Alan just has got a knack for never putting the team in a dangerous position. He used to just awe me when we arrive at an airport, such as Oshkosh or anything. He would way out, listen to everything. He's been a great air traffic controller. He could tell where everything was, where everybody was, and he would just position us every time at the safest spot. And in 24 years he and I flew together, he never scared me once.
Wow.
So we've became great friends, and we've done a lot of things that we probably can't even tell you guys about.
Yeah.
But we've had a good time.
When did it become 4 aircraft?
It was 3 for a long time. I ended up starting another business, and I told him, look, I got to cut back. I can't be doing quite this much. And we had Gene on, so he and I were kind of sharing shows, and Gene and I were splitting shows. Well, what happens when we all 4 finally end up there? Well, let's go try it. And Gene says, well, I want to try a slot. And we did an air show. I think the first one was in Jackson, wasn't it? When we did the first 4 ship.
So, yeah.
And I don't know. It just, people love the 4 ship better than the 3. And so here we are.
So who were the new 2?
When Ben decided after 12 or 13 seasons, he decided to go do something else, and they needed somebody to fill in. And like I said, in the beginning, they were 3 airplanes. Well, Gene came along and said, look, I don't want to be splitting with anybody. I want to go to all of them. And so Alan was leading and Gene was flying. And so then Steve and I started splitting shows. And so I took Ben's place. And basically what I did was I came on and I flew the right wing. And I stayed on the right side for 12 years.
So how many years have you been, all of you, as a team?
This is our 32nd season.
32nd season. I'm the only original member.
Yeah.
Wow.
Flying, actually. Anyway, thank you.
How many shows do you do a year?
Between 20 and 25. I think we got, 22 this year?
Yeah, somewhere along there.
Yeah, something like that.
It's amazing. We'll start off, we'll leave ICAS, and we'll maybe leave out of there with 20 air shows, and then all of a sudden we'll be down to 18 and think, man, this is, because we'll have some cancellations. And the next thing you know, you get phone calls, and then you're back up 22, 23. So it's kind of a moving number, but we'll end up about 22 or 23.
So is all of your work in the summer?
Air show season in general is usually from about mid-March to the very beginning of November. For example, but like Florida and South Texas, we've done shows in South Texas as early as February. And of course, a lot of people, and we've done a few where we've gone, like we went to El Salvador here several years back, and that was a January show. And so south of the border, it's always hot down there.
So how often do you fly together in what I'll call the off season? Do you fly together at all?
Not as a team.
Not a lot.
I'm an ag pilot. Also had a aerial application business and farm, and we all had other things, that we did. And we kind of did this on the side. But once Aeroshell came on, I don't know, it just kind of tagged you. So we got busier. But I still
when was that?
fly.
When did you become involved with Shell?
2001.
2001 was our first year.
And they've been great to us. Just great.
So do you all have other jobs? Well, you just mentioned yours, Steve. Do you all have other jobs?
Yeah, we all did.
Well, yeah, we had a family wholesale parts business, but we actually sold that in 03. 03 happened to be a really good air show year because it was the 100th anniversary of flight, and we did like 31 shows that year. And I was trying to run a business and fly air shows, and I got to where I couldn't do both. And so I had to make a decision. I was either going to have to quit the team or sell my business. And so, I loved doing what I was doing, and I wasn't getting rich, but I was making some money. And so we sold the business. And so we've been basically doing air shows. We call it full time, but it's 20-something weekends a year. But all of us do other things. I'm an A&P, so I work on other airplanes. I'm also an examiner, so I do flight tests but it gave me a lot of free time to do a lot of other flying that I would not have normally been able to do. I fly for the Collings Foundation. I fly their bombers and on tour with them, and I spend about anywhere from 8 to 10 weeks a year with them. And so it's stuff that I wouldn't have been able to do if I still had my business.
Do Brian and Gene talk at all?
Yeah. and I'll hand the mic to Jimmy. He's retired airline pilot, and he's the newest guy on the team, and he's been a good addition. And so here's the mic, Jimmy.
Yeah, jump in down there, Gene and Brian. When did you join? 32 years ago? No. Me. You joined 30. Yeah.
I started playing with the T6s many years ago, and then I met these what I call kids. I met these boys, and they were doing some air shows, and I got the opportunity to get to try to do some formation with them, and it developed where we were getting more popular and booking shows, and it started out, and we decided on a 4-ship, and I told them, I said, look, I'll come on board. I'd already retired many years ago, even at about the time I started with these boys. Tell them how old you are. Oh, no. Age is just a number. But I told them I would come on board if they would get serious about it, and we could go out and try to market ourselves with sponsors and make this a business, not a plaything, because most air show people have something else going and they don't do this full time. And I said, if I'm going to do it, I want to be compensated and I want to be sponsored. And we agreed on that, and we started beating on doors and got some good sponsors, especially Aeroshell. And this thing has become a total year-round business now. And the question was, I think I started in full-time in 95, I'm guessing. Yeah. Was when I started.
How surprised are any of you that he can fly at his age as well as he does?
It's every day.
We check him out of the nursing home every weekend.
Sometimes we don't wind him up enough in the mornings, and he gets about halfway through the day. But most days he does pretty good.
What I tell folks, and the little girl up here, she asked me, you still flying? I'm going, oh, that hurts. But they let me out of the nursing home on Thursdays. I have to be back in Monday afternoon. And they want to put a bracelet on there on my legs, GPS, so they can keep up with me.
Well, just so long as they don't put it on your toe. Yeah. Brian, when did you join up?
Well, actually, I started when Alan got hurt, and it's kind of Oshkosh is kind of a momentous thing for that. He actually got hurt about a week before Oshkosh, about 8 years ago, and that was. They called me. I'd been flying for Red Baron for several years, and they needed somebody to step in and fill in, trying to figure out, if they could get somebody that was able to join the formation and how best to fit in. And so I came along, and they thought maybe they were telling me, like, would you come to a couple of shows, hang out a bit, and we'll see if you get along with us, that kind of stuff. And who knows, by the end of the season, you might fly a show or two, that kind of thing, if it works out. So I showed up, I think on a Thursday, and the following Thursday we did the first show, and it was it all clicked. It worked pretty good. And,
how challenging was the transition to join the team? They knew each other so well, both in the cockpit and out. How challenging was that?
Well, we're from the same region, so biggest battle was learning the language, and I had that knocked out, so that worked out good. But no, we came from similar flying cultures as well, so it fit right in. I had to learn how to fly. Well, I basically had to learn to put the gear up. I've been flying Stearmans for 16 years, and had to learn to work the T6. But all the rest of the flying was pretty much the same. And the story about trying to figure out where to put me was they were pondering it. I said, well, it seems pretty simple to me. I said, I got a bunch of lead experience. I said, you need a lead. Put me out there. All I got to do is fumble around and stay in the box somehow, and y'all just do what you've been doing for 25 years. And it worked out pretty good.
So you fly lead now?
No, I flew lead for the first year and a half, right. And then we had to get him fixed. He had a little heart problem, and we lost him for about a year. And so I flew his position for a year, and that's when Jimmy showed up. And Jimmy was our backup pilot, and we pressed him into service as lead for 2010. And then once we got him fixed, got him back the next year, then Jimmy went back to standby status, and then they moved me to right wing, and Mark pushed me out of lead. He didn't want me to lead anymore. So,
so Jimmy, you joined more recently than any of them.
Right. I was 2010 when Gene had a little medical issue, and then they took me and said, hey, you get in the front and we'll tell you what to do. And so I led. And then, like I said, when Gene came back, they had a 4-ship, and then I kind of went out for a year. I didn't do much. And then they said, hey, why don't you keep working at it and practice? And, Gene and I started swapping out because we both fly the slot position. So it kind of gives us a situation where if somebody was to go down, we could move around a little bit and have a backup and keep flying.
When, no, go ahead, Mark.
No, I was just saying, when Jimmy first started, somebody asked him one day, said, do you fly lead? He said, I just fly the airplane in the front.
But they were always telling me where to go in no uncertain terms.
When you, the off season, to the extent you have one, and then when you come back to start getting ready for shows, how much do you have to practice, and where do you do it? What altitudes? What goes on in that process?
Go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things is the routine hadn't really changed in a very long time, and so basically we're just brushing up on the skills. So we just go out and repeat the routine several times. We can get it done in the course of a couple of days, and just basically get warmed up. And some of us have to get our G tolerance back because we've been playing golf and sleeping all winter. But
yeah, Jimmy's he's the new guy, so. We've got a friend that's Stan Music at home, and he and the two of them will get together and kind of tune him up. What we do is it's a choreographed dance in the air. And like I say, I've been doing it 32 years, so, you don't have to go out there and spend a season. The Blue Angels, they swap guys every, 2 years?
Right.
Well, that's a whole new, if we did that, that'd be a whole new ball game. But all of us, I'd kind of say, are like veterans in this. And now we do practice, we go, but we won't spend, we used to spend, when we first started, a lot longer tuning up, but it doesn't take us long anymore.
So when you do it, when you first start tuning up, to use your term, do you do this at a higher altitude? Do you spread out at all?
No, it's harder. It's harder up high.
Wow.
It's a lot more. It's a lot more. Yeah.
Wow.
It's harder spread out. It's harder. The higher you are, you don't have the ground reference as much. Wow. And number two is you need to practice in your atmosphere where you're going to be.
Yeah.
So I have an aerobatic box at home that's legal by the FAA that allows us to come do that not at air shows.
Right.
and Jimmy's got a box. Oh, y'all still have a
Yeah,
box.
we got a
Ace got a box. So that's how we do it.
Now
Yeah, we
explain
do.
that. You've got a box. Is this an area?
Yes.
Over an airfield or not
Right.
over an airfield?
It is designated by the FAA. I'm a aerobatic competency evaluator. So if you wanted to come fly air shows, you could bring your airplane and say, hey, Steve, I want to get into the air show business. So you would come to me and I would first talk to you and do all the ground stuff. And then I could open my box. See, legally, you cannot do aerobatics below 1,500 feet, period, unless you're in waivered airspace.
I'm good.
And this box allows you to come all the way down to the surface. And you're not allowed to charge for it. You can't have, you can't just say, well, I got a box and I'm going to charge you. You can't do that. It's for practice to keep everybody safe.
Right. The word risk, which I mentioned in the opening video, what does the word risk mean to all of you ever since you started flying? What's it mean?
Well, I always tried to use something that Steve's dad told me. He says, you want to do something worth watching in an air show, but you don't want to do anything that's really potentially dangerous. So what I've always kind of used as a correlation is, let's just say you were standing at the Grand Canyon and you walk up and you hang your toes over the edge of the cliff. That's pretty risky. That's right on the edge. But if you back up about 3 feet, it's a beautiful view and you're not going to fall off the edge. And our flying is that way. We try to push it, but we don't push it to a point where it gets dangerous.
Yeah.
We just don't have close, don't have a close call.
Yeah.
And we do have contingencies and a plan for if we have any kind of engine failures or weather minimums. This is all discussed and it's in the back of our minds all the time. But as long as everything's working like it's supposed to be, we're just doing something that's fun to do and nice to watch.
Words of advice to any of you pilots out there that are getting into formation flying. We have a lot of people come to us all the time asking us about it. I'm going to give you a huge piece of advice right here, and my father told me this also. Fly where you're comfortable. Don't try to push yourself up into this so-called relative position. This is where they say I'm supposed to be. You got time for that later. First, and you can't learn anything if you're not comfortable. You need to get up there and get where you say, okay, I feel pretty good right here. Trust me, over time, all of a sudden you're going to be a little closer, and then a little bit closer. And the next thing you know, you're going to be doing it. But if you just try to thrust yourself in there, you're going to get dangerous. You're not going to learn anything. So just take that piece of advice, and it's always worked well with me. I'm just as comfortable flying close to here as your tennis shoe. I wouldn't have done that when I first started. Right. You got to work your way into it, So,
Brian,
use that piece of advice to stay safe.
Yeah, and to add on to this, what he was saying is, if you look at, if you ever heard the term "practice makes perfect," or maybe the follow-on "perfect practice makes perfect," well, that's I always take that back a step and say that get back to just general practice. If when you're doing what we do, the formation stuff, there can be a perfect spot to be in. Well, if you learn only that perfect spot, if you just practice that all the time and you have it perfect every time, well, you're not going to know what's in the other realms of what could happen. You got to be ready for anything. And so you end up building a base of knowledge of what it's like to be in all these different positions. And so it's about tuning yourself to a comfortable position and getting comfortable with your abilities and knowing what that realm is so that you don't go outside of that.
Do you ever change positions? You got lead 2, 3, 4. Do you ever switch around?
We don't do it during the season, unless we're forced to. Somebody gets sick or something like that, and we all have flown more than one position, so we're familiar with it, and we can move people around if we need to. But we'll have to, shut down and go train it up before we come out and start.
We
doing
do
shows
swap
with
a couple of times, like slot, which is Jimmy and Gene. If you watch the show, there's a spot where they're not slot. They're actually form up and do a fly on right wing doing a barrel roll. Same thing for Brian and I fly left wing. There's a spot, if you'll watch the show, where we split around, then I'm flying on Brian's right wing. Well, now Brian's lead. So actually, if you watch the show really closely, you'll see where we do those. So we do change positions in the show.
Yeah. Well, over the years, we've had, when we brought new people on, we actually, one person that hadn't been mentioned, we had a guy named Morris Ray. He flew with us for part of a year. And like you said, we always kind of put the new guy on the right. And so, like, I spent many hours training. We were training him, and what I did, I flew left wing during all those training sessions, and then we did several air shows that I flew left. Even though I've never stayed over there, but I developed the skills. It's amazing. If you go fly, you'll get on the right side, you'll be really comfortable. When you move to the left, and it's like you're in a totally new place. It is not anywhere. The two don't complement each other at all. Now, station keeping, flying formation complement, but the dynamics change depending on what side you are. But each of us have flown. Gene's flown both sides. Brian's flown both sides, and of course Steve's flown both sides. And so, if we ever get into a situation where we've had over the years, like Alan might have a mechanical. And then what we ended up doing, either Steve immediately would take the lead or I'd take the lead, and then we just moved the slot to the other side, whatever happened to side it may be. And then, we never missed a beat. Within about a minute and a half, we were back in the box.
Wow.
And so, but it was all because we'd all developed that skill set that we could move around like that. But we don't do it as a matter of, normally I lead, Steve's left wing, Brian's right wing, and Jimmy and Gene fly slot.
Now, you mentioned the Blue Angels a little while ago, and also the Thunderbirds. And the lead, as we all know from watching TV or whatever,
right,
the lead talks through the entire show,
exactly,
right? Do you all do the same thing?
Same thing.
Yeah, constantly. Well, the thing of flying lead that I always wanted to do is be sure that there's never any guesswork. When we head downhill and getting ready to do a maneuver or whatever, I don't want any of them ever second guessing what's next, because that's a good way to get yourself hurt. So it may be a situation where I may talk too much, but if you're getting ready, even like flying in air traffic control or something, you want to tell people, you're getting ready, you're going to turn left, you're going to turn right, we're adding power, going up, down. They never need to be wondering what's next. If you're doing that, you're failing as a leader.
Yeah. The ironic thing is like I said, you do, as a lead, you do try to talk. But we've had cases where, I remember one time Alan was leading and his mic went out. And he couldn't, he pushed the button and we couldn't hear a thing. And so, we just said, look, just keep going. And so he'd be going downhill. We knew the loop was coming up. He just nod his head. We'd all turn the smoke on. We'd pull the loop, come around the backside, he'd nod his head, and we'd turn the smoke off, and then he'd position for the next maneuver. Did the whole show, and he never said a word.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do any of you ever, first, ferrying these airplanes, what does it take? Who ferries these airplanes everywhere, and how challenging is that?
We ferry them all ourselves,
wow.
Hey,
we get home a lot faster than the airlines.
We got autopilots, CD players. We get up about 10, 12,000 feet and flip our S-Tech autopilots on with GPS steering, and it's nice and cool. Who wants to? I don't have to take my shoes off either.
Yeah, we've got the Aspen. We have the Aspen displays that work absolutely phenomenal. They got approaches in them. So because we fly, if we need to, we'll file IFR, go home, shoot an approach. We've got all the and Jeppesen helps us with all those databases. I mean, we've got some great sponsors that have helped us get the airplanes to where they are today, where we can comfortably go cross country, and we're not having to, if we get a line of showers or whatever, we've got WSI weather on board. We pick our way through it. I mean, the equipment we have is better than most airliners.
And it's another thing about flying these airplanes. The T6 that I'm flying, my dad bought the year I was born in 1960. The very one you see me flying, he paid $1,200 for it. And the guy he bought 12 of them for $1,000 a piece. So I know that airplane in and out, and all these guys do too. And we're all certified airplane mechanics. If it's going to break down on the road, I want to be there because I'll know pretty much how to fix it. And so that's another thing. It isn't that I wouldn't trust another pilot, but I got to get there some way.
Yeah.
So,
what kind of airspeeds, when you're going cross-country, going home, what kind of airspeeds are you talking about?
Usually file around 150 knots.
Are there any of you days where you feel maybe a little off, you don't feel great, and you get up in the air and you just, for some reason, feel a little bit uncomfortable? What you're doing, does that ever happen?
Well, I was going to say that the worst situation I was ever in, when we went to El Salvador back several years ago, I got into some kind of bad water or food or whatever, and I mean, I was sick as a dog, especially the last day. Now, Gene, he was actually sick enough that he stood down. He said, look, he said, boys, y'all just go. There's no way I can do it. But I toughed it out, and I stayed with it, but I probably should have stood down too. But it was one of those things that, of course, we were a lot younger then. It was about 15 years ago, and I toughed through it, and we did it. And I flew we did 2 routines that day. I did the first routine, and I felt okay, and so I went ahead and did the second one. But then that night, I really kind of came down with some I don't know if it was food poisoning or whatever, but I was pretty sick.
Are there any instances or in your memory where you sense that somebody else of the 4 of you might be having a little discomfort or anything like that? Just about the awareness of the other 3 guys.
So. Not really. We know each other real well. It's kind of funny. My wife, Mark over here, we spend so much time on the road in the van, she'll call me on the phone and say, hey, what's wifey doing? That's my wife's nickname for him, wifey.
Well, somebody's got to take care of him because he can't. You ask him, you got your pen? No, I don't have my pen. Well, you got your wallet? Where's my wallet? Where's my phone? So somebody's got to take care of him.
That's true. That's true.
Steve's wife has to pack his clothes in order so he'll know what to wear on what day.
I got a good one, don't I? See, guys, you got to play dumb sometimes, But it all keeps it in the fun, and I've got a good one. We've been together 32 years.
Great. Who's the best pilot among you?
We get asked that a lot, and you can't say that about anybody in here. Some of us have, in my opinion, have better qualities than others. But each of us has his individual thing that he might stand out on. But if you could wrap all of us up at one and mix us up in a bowl, now you'd really have something right there. But everybody's got their thing that they're really. Each of us has a special deal.
Yeah, Brian.
Well, one of the things that keeps us together is that we can always take each other down a notch. So, and that way we keep each other in check and keep ourselves on about an even.
Yeah, egos around. You got ego around us. It's gonna get chopped up pretty quick.
Yeah, that keeps the communications open, and I mean, we have so much fun doing this. It's just, and that's why we like each other.
Gene, yeah.
Let me answer the question. Who's the best pilot?
Yeah.
Well, everybody knows in formation flying, the Blues, the Thunderbirds, that the slot pilot has the hardest job. He's got a bigger circle to fly. I can teach a
Amen.
monkey how to fly their position.
All right, we're going to have to take him down a notch when he gets done, guys.
Well, keep going, Gene. Work out with Jimmy.
But seriously, we're talking about different positions on the team and what's hard, what's the hardest position and that kind of stuff, which relates to who's the best pilot. In the slot, the airplane gets beat up harder because we're trying to fly a bigger circle. So Gene and I have to fly faster than Mark to make it look right. And then Steve's always getting the rolls into him. And Brian has certain issues that he has. And Mark has to do all the planning as he's coming into the box and everything. So each one of us is thinking about a little bit different thing that we're going to do as we get to go on a maneuver. And together, if we've done it and thought it out right and it works out right, we've accomplished what we wanted to.
Right.
I don't think we've ever flown an absolutely perfect air show. Now, we've flown some really, really good air shows. You could always sit around and say, well, if I could have done this a little bit better or that or whatever.
But do you do that? Do you post-show? Do you chat it up?
Yeah.
I know the Blues do, and right.
Yeah, my knee right here that you see, this was a screw up on a barrel roll. And Alan advised Gene and Brian to hold me down, and Mark and Steve kicked me in the knee. And that was just for messing up a barrel roll. But we kid each other, but seriously, if you screw up something, you're going to hear about it big time. Yeah.
Steve, do you have something you wanted to say about Gene?
Oh, well, geez, where do you want me to start? Oh, Lord have mercy. Yeah, but I am proud of Gene. He's 76, and it's pretty amazing. He does an awesome job, and have some people say, well, when is it time to quit? When they try to take Bob Hoover's medical away from him. Well, Bob knew when it was going to be time, and we watch Gene, and he's never scared me. And he feels good. And
I think Gene's flying's getting better. Seems like with age, it's like a fine wine.
Yeah,
he just needed a few days off. He's good.
But when they cleaned his pipes out, he was a new man then.
Yeah.
Well, what a pleasure to get acquainted with all of you. Thank you for doing this. In a couple of minutes, I think, Mark, are you going to do the walk around? Yeah. No, Mark is going to get with Sam Bass. Our Sam Bass who's there, and walk around and learn more about these airplanes. Also, I think Kyle, is Kyle? Oh, there's Kyle. And she's got challenge coins.
Oh.
You got those? So when we finish this part of the program, if you want challenge coins, see Kyle. And also, any questions from the floor?
Any questions anybody have? All right, sir, go ahead. Smoke oil, we hold around 22. We burn 2 gallons per minute per airplane. Usually we burn around 65 gallons per performance for the team to go up. But these 1340s, we've done it all. If you 2 gallons a minute, 2.5 gallons, it starts streaming on the wing, keeps the wing wet. 2 burns. A gallon an hour makes you look like you got bad rings. Anybody else?
Any questions? Sir, anybody?
Go ahead.
We got one down here. Yeah.
I was just wondering, do you boys have like real jobs too, or do you just do this for full time?
Well, we said, we kind of cut across that. I was a aerial applicator. Terminology that everybody knows is such as a crop duster. I still spray a little bit, around 150 hours a year. I farm 550 acres at home. Wow. I had a car wash. I sold that about 3 years ago. I said that whenever my last child got out of high school, I was going to get rid of that. But we all do. And Mark and Alan had a parts business. Brian's always been a professional pilot. He flew with the Red Baron team. We accuse him his breath still smells like pizza sometimes. And Gene, he had his own McNeely Air Cargo, and he's also was a crop duster. And Jimmy's a retired airline pilot. Man, those
There we
guys
go.
are noisy.
Yeah,
hear.
he's not transmitting. What did he say?
Are we that loud when we fly over?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, we are. Oh, okay.
Yeah, when we're flying, typically they're about 8 to 10 feet. The closest point that they have is actually, matter of fact, these two airplanes are parked like about in the same position. The elevator is actually the closest that you'll get. Right now, I think they got it parked about 3, maybe 4 feet, but so we're only about 8 feet, so it's just about double that.
Well. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Gentlemen, thank you so
Thank
much.
you, David.
What a
Thank
pleasure.
you so much.
Thank you.
And we'll turn it over to Sam Bass.
Mark, now this, of course, is an Air Force trainer or an Army trainer. When did they first design this airplane?
They were in the late or mid 30s when they, when they started designing. I think it was like a B. I forgot exactly what the designation of the North American designation, right. but they built a version of this that actually had fixed gear that they built before they came up with the AT-6, and so it was a progression. It wasn't, they didn't just come out and say, all right, well, here's the T-6 like you see it. It was, it developed. It actually was an airplane a lot more like a BT-13 when they first came. Had a smaller engine, had fixed gear. But then they, were trying to improve it, and so they put the bigger power plant, and they put the retractable landing gear on it, and so actually the original one didn't really build it as a trainer. They thought they would be able to sell it as a ground attack, and so but that didn't sell. So they came back and said, all right, but it would make a great trainer, and so that's where the AT-6 came from.
And it was an advanced trainer
it
for
was
the
an advanced
fighter
trainer.
guys.
Yeah, all the designation. You started off in the primary trainers. The Stearmans, the PT-17s, PT-13s, the Fairchilds, PT-19s. They had a lot of PTs, and then the cadet. Then once they graduated the primary training, then they would and that's where they would first solo was in the primary training. Well, then they'd go one more step. They'd go to BT, basic training, and it was a little more advanced, but it still had fixed gear, but it had a variable pitch propeller, it had flaps, and then they would also start doing a lot more formation training and other combat type maneuvering. But then once they graduated the basic trainer, then they moved to the advanced trainer. And this is where you actually learn how to fight. And so they would drop bombs. They had machine guns. These had, most of them had one machine gun in the right wing, and they also had a machine gun in the nose. And so for the cadet would fly it and do gunnery training with it. They also used them for gunnery training. They'd put a gunner in the back seat. It's always a T-6 making noise, right?
Yeah, they're good.
But they would put a gunner in the back. They had a fold-down rear canopy, and they actually did gunnery training in them as well. So they did a lot more than just pilot training. But that was it. Was primary purpose was for pilot training. Anyway, once you graduated advanced training, then you got your wings, and then you got moved on to fighters.
Now, what engine do you have in here?
This is a Pratt & Whitney. It's an R1340. It's rated at 600 horsepower at sea level. And now this engine obviously, is a 30s design, but they built that same engine way up through the 60s. And of course, the engine later on was used for a lot of aerial applicator applications, AgCats, and that kind of stuff. And so it's a very, very reliable power plant. It's one of the most reliable power plants that Pratt & Whitney ever built.
All right, now you're flying a G model, is that correct?
That's what I have is a G.
Tell us about the G model, what the difference is between the G.
Well, what they ended up doing, the earlier models, they first off, the hydraulic system was different because they actually had a what we call a power push, which was a valve that you actually pushed down, which gave it hydraulic pressure, and then you could put the gear up and the gear down, flaps up, flaps down. When they came out with the G model, they actually had a mechanism that had a cam that basically when you either moved the flaps or moved the landing gear, it automatically pressed that power push valve, and so it just did away with that power push lever. They also, most of the later ones, they all incorporated what we call a P51 Tail Wheel. Now that was a mod that they went back and put in a bunch of the earlier models, but the G's all came out with the P51 Tail Wheel. And what that meant was that the tail wheel would steer on the ground as long as the lock mechanism was engaged, but when you push the stick all the way to the forward extreme, it pulled the lock pin out and it would full swivel. And of course that was the same mechanism. It's actually some of the same parts that's in a P51, so that's why they call it a P51 tail wheel.
Then I understand that when they developed the P51, they actually used some of the parts.
They did.
off of the
Well,
T6.
the lock mechanism on the tail wheel steering is so robust that it worked well on the Mustang as well.
All right, now this was also post-war. It was used as a primary trainer. As a matter of fact, I only had 20 hours of flying time when I got into this airplane. This airplane, even though I flew the 747, is still the biggest airplane I've ever flown.
What they ended up doing was in the late 40s, especially the early 50s, what they did away with all the primary and basic. You just went out. I mean, I've talked to a lot of guys. Their very first airplane ever to fly in their life, because they went into the military, was an AT-6. And they said it was very daunting to climb in that thing the very first time and never been in an airplane.
Well, you know, that was my era too, because I had never been in an airplane, and I got 20 hours in a Cub and got into this thing, and it was huge for me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Going from a Cub to this, I mean, it's got to be from like sitting in a Cherokee and getting in a 747 to be the complexity of it.
Well, tell us a little bit about flying it. I mean, just basic flying that you would imagine as far as a trainer was concerned. Of course, you had plenty of time.
One thing that this airplane did, it made a good trainer, is it's not that easy to fly in the sense, now in the air, it's a dream. It's very light on the controls. The controls, especially in pitch, you don't really have to trim it very much. You do have to use a little rudder, but there is a rudder trim. But the problem is when you try to take off and land. Obviously, being conventional gear, the landing gear are forward to the CG, and so every time if you swerve the airplane, the center of gravity is trying to push you outside the turn. It's trying to ground loop, and the gear's fairly narrow and it sits up high, and it ground loops very easy, and it does it very quickly if you're not on your toes. And so what happens, it makes you be very diligent with your feet. Matter of fact, I tell people that I'm instructing, I say, if you're not when you touch the ground, if you're not moving your feet, you're wrecking. Because if you don't keep moving your rudder pedals the whole time, this airplane will try to swap ends on you.
Well, do you instruct in this some too?
Well, not in this area. I have another one.
Yeah, all right.
I have another one.
I don't mean that airplane.
Yeah, but I have another airplane that people come out and I'll instruct, or if somebody buys a T6 and I'll go fly with them, because a lot of insurance companies require you to have either a CFL sign off or 25 hours or 10 hours, depending on how much experience they have. And so Steve and several other guys on the team have been recognized by the insurance company. If we sign off that they're good to go, then they don't ask any questions. The insurance is good.
You do that with some of the guys that are upgrading the Mustangs and whatever.
Yeah, I do.
Because that's required also.
Well, the thing is, like, for example, if you're flying, like you want to get type rated in a TBM, for example. Matter of fact, Brad Deckard came down when he first bought the airplane wanting to get typed. Well, there's not really any dual control TBM, so he came down. And Alan and I actually gave him some dual instruction. Great student, and so he came down, flew the airplane pretty easy. He had a lot of helicopter experience, so he knew how to use his feet. Right. And then, of course, and the reason why he had to come to us is because we were typed in a TBM, and that's kind of the way the rules are. The flight instructor has to be rated in the airplane before they can recommend them. And so he came to us. We gave him the instruction, and then Vern Jost actually worked with him and got him his type rating. So, and we've done a few of those like that. And so same thing like with if you want to get a P51 type rating, then it's the same thing. You actually, because most Mustangs are single control, and so you come and you actually, the applicable trainer is the AT6, so you train them, typically put them in the back seat, make sure that they can operate the airplane from the back seat, because if you can fly the airplane from the back seat, because the visibility is not very good, you're flying the airplane not just on what you see, but also on what you feel. And once you've developed those two skills, and that's what you need to have to fly the fighter.
How about the role of this in in Korea and a little bit in Vietnam.
Well, they didn't go to Vietnam, but they did go to Korea. Now, this particular airplane was actually sold to the French government, and it was used in the exact same way that the Mosquito squadrons used them during Korea as artillery spotters. This one had rockets that were mounted under the wing, and what they would do is they would fly around till they saw the enemy, and then they would shoot the rockets, and then that gave something for the artillery to home in on.
But no guns.
No, they had guns on them.
Did they have guns
they
too?
had guns in the wing and guns in the nose. Now, some of them they could actually put gun pods under them instead of the rockets. But typically, they either had one or the other. And but this airplane saw action in North Africa during the French-Algerian War. And it's got a bunch of bullet holes in it.
Really?
That have been they've been patched, of course, and so whoever did a nice job.
Yeah. Well, I understand that over 60 countries use this, and well, for one, I guess South Africa was the last one.
They was the last one. I think they retired theirs 92, 93 time frame, somewhere along in there. And
there were some that we used to actually, I think the Israelis used it for ground support for something.
Well, like I said, the most of the G models were, a lot of them were trainers, but there was a lot of them that were used in that artillery spotter role. And they made the thing is for an artillery spotter, you don't want something that's super fast, because if you just fly over the enemy, you don't see them. But a T6 is very maneuverable. You can circle. It's got good visibility. Of course, when you're moving slow and you stay over the target, you get shot at.
Yeah.
And that's hence why they get a lot of bullet holes. But it made a really good artillery spotter, and so they made quite a few of those over the years.
Well, I really appreciate you bringing your airplane here.
Yes, sir.
And it's nice talking to you.
All right, glad to do it.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, yes, sir. Thanks.